Welcome to another episode of Altitude Shift, the podcast where I explore how to show up at work with greater executive presence, personal authority, and emotional steadiness. I'm your host, Chris Verley, and this episode is a little bit of a special one. I'm dedicating it to every single one of you who's on their way to work, coming back from work, or taking some time off work because they're going through a crisis in their personal lives and they're hurting right now. Anyone who's days, weeks, months into something heavy at home, some grief, illness, heartbreak, or any kind of personal crisis, but still doing everything they possibly can to try and hold it together at work. I'm also dedicating this episode to your boss, your clients, or some of your team members who might also be hurting right now for reasons unknown to you and who are still powering through on Zoom or in the office. But before I go any further, I want to speak directly to those of you who are right at the very start of it. The first hours or days after bad news, when everything feels like a bit of a blur and you can barely think straight. If something's just happened, a phone call, a diagnosis, a betrayal, a sudden drop in your mental health, I want you to step away. Call someone you trust. Cancel your meetings and let people know you're unavailable today. If you work for yourself, put on an auto reply. Say something like, urgent personal matter, I'll be in touch when I can. In those first hours of a crisis, your only job is to stop the bleeding and to give yourself permission to be human before you try to be professional. But what I will focus on today is when the initial shock has already passed, but you're still not okay. How do you keep showing up at work as a leader, a founder, a freelancer, or an employee? How do you protect your steadiness, your authority, and your presence when your personal life feels like it's in a freefall? And even if everything feels fine right now, keep listening, because life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. And at some point, you or someone you work with may well need some of the advice I'm about to dish out. Now, if you've listened to this podcast before, you know I like to bring in a bit of neuroscience. Partly because it makes me sound like I know what I'm talking about, but mostly because it can be deeply reassuring to realize that whatever's happening inside of you emotionally right now is completely normal on a biological level. So let's break it down. Say something devastating or destabilizing happens, your nervous system will kick into survival mode. Your body floods with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, and that's your system saying something's not right, stay alert, stay safe. At the same time, the amygdala, which is your internal alarm system, ramps up, while the prefrontal cortex, and that's the part responsible for logic and decision making, starts to go offline. So if you're finding it hard to concentrate, you're forgetting things, or you're bursting into tears because you can't open an attachment, that's not you being dramatic or incompetent. That's your brain prioritizing survival over productivity, and maybe you being a little bit overdramatic. And it's not just your mental capacity that takes a hit, your body does too. Wide awake at 3 a.m. but falling asleep at your desk at 3 p.m. Headaches, stomach issues, chest tightness, that's your system working overtime just to keep you going. And what people often don't realize is that this doesn't stop after just 1 week. Sometimes even months into a crisis, these effects can linger, especially if the situation itself hasn't been resolved. Now, if you're the kind of person who usually feels quite steady and in control, this can feel confusing and humiliating even. You start to wonder, why am I not handling this better? You're not malfunctioning though. You're reacting exactly as any other human would under this type of pressure. And once you understand that this is biology and not failure or weakness on your behalf, you can start to work with it. You can start to create just enough structure and stability to help you show up even when nothing else feels stable. And that's what the rest of this episode is about. Now, before I get into the how to regain your footing at work during a personal crisis, You need to pause and ask yourself, why am I at work right now and not at home, despite feeling the way I feel? Having that clarity is important because knowing why you're showing up will shape how you show up. If you're still going into work because you need the money coming in, then my advice is that you focus only on what's essential. Deliver whatever's required of you and nothing more. This isn't the time for stretch goals or over-functioning. But if you're at work because you like the structure, then let work support you, but not overwhelm you. Lighten your calendar. Reduce friction where you can and try and leave enough breathing room between meetings. Or, if work is a break from whatever's happening at home, that's okay too. Sometimes the routine at work it can help calm your system, but just don't let work become a form of avoidance. And if you're pushing through out of guilt or pressure to prove that you're still dependable, that's a bit of a red flag, because burnout often starts because of that fear of slowing down. If that sounds like you, ask yourself, is this sustainable, or am I just doing this to keep up appearances? And if you're scared to ask for time off or for a lighter workload, maybe because there really isn't anyone else to cover for you, then at the very least, scale back what you can. Protect your energy where possible. Because pushing at full tilt when you're already depleted, it doesn't make you stronger or more reliable. It just increases the risk of burnout, mistakes, and longer-term damage. So, what I'm saying here is that you do need to be clear with yourself about what you're hoping work will give you right now. And once you understand that, you're less likely to overextend, drop your boundaries, or burn out. Now that we've looked at what's going on in your system and why you're even showing up at work at all, I'm going to give you 5 suggestions on how to stay functional at work in the midst of a personal crisis. Number 1 is to control the flow of information. Suggestion number 1 is to figure out who needs to know what, especially in those first days when a crisis hits. Now, just to be clear, you don't own everyone the full story, but you also don't want people misreading your behavior. If your energy is off, your output is lower, or your availability suddenly becomes much more limited, you do need to give just enough context to avoid confusion or suspicion or even gossip. So you want to avoid oversharing, but you definitely want to be proactive. You can say something like, hey guys, I'm dealing with something personal here and it may affect my focus and my availability for a little while. I'm going to keep you updated if anything changes, but I appreciate your understanding. That's it. Now you get to decide who gets more detail and who doesn't. For your manager or a trusted colleague, it might make sense to share a little bit more, especially if they can help you lighten the load. But for others, that simple one-liner, that's enough. And if you're a business owner or a freelancer or someone without a formal team, you still need to manage expectations. You can update your out of office or let a key client know turnaround times might be a little bit slower. You keep it professional, but you keep it human. The main thing here is that you need to stay in control of the narrative. If you say nothing, people will fill in the blanks themselves, and they will often assume the worst. So yes, first of all, control the flow of information by being intentional about what you share and with whom. Suggestion number 2 is to redefine performance. Now, this is often the hardest for high performers. That's adjusting what you expect of yourself. Now, I explained the brain chemistry earlier, and what's clear is that when you're in a state like this, you're not operating at full capacity. So you need to stop holding yourself to full capacity standards. When you're in a crisis, your job is not to impress anyone, but it's to protect your energy and to meet only your essential obligations. That is it. Now this means getting really clear on what are the non-negotiables. What are the tasks or the relationships that I can't allow to let fall apart? Then you prioritize those, and everything else you delegate, you postpone, or you drop. Now, if you're used to being the person who's always going the extra mile, this will feel uncomfortable. But it's necessary because you pushing to maintain your usual output while you're emotionally depleted is just going to make it more likely that you'll crash later. And again, if you're self-employed, this still applies. Your business might be your livelihood, but frankly, you're not going to have a business left if you run yourself into the ground. So, be ruthless about what can wait. Delay all the non-essential projects. Automate what you can, do fewer things, but do them with whatever focus you have. So my suggestion here is that you redefine performance by knowing your limits and protecting what matters most. The third suggestion I have is all about building in time for recovery. In times of crisis, your nervous system is in overdrive. So, one of the most useful things you can do is to create small, reliable systems that help you contain some of the internal and external chaos in your life, and that can help you come back to center. Now, this doesn't mean hours of self-care, because most people don't have the time or even the headspace for that in a crisis. But what you need is some structure and a few things that can ground you, even if just for a little bit. So this might look like starting your day with 5 quiet minutes. No phone, no email, just sitting still with a coffee or even staring out of the window before you even open your laptop. It could mean stepping outside a little bit more for fresh air. Standing on your balcony, your porch, on the street for 2 minutes. Smokers do this all the time. Why wouldn't you do that? Or blocking 30 minutes in your calendar just to eat a proper lunch, rather than skipping food or eating mindlessly at your desk. And you can think of these as reset buttons or some handrails for you to hold on to. They're not going to fix whichever crisis you're going through, but they might stabilize you a little bit, just enough for you to keep showing up. Also, build in space to process. Don't carry your pain or worry all day and then hope it'll just dissolve in and of itself, because that's not going to happen. The only way out is through. Whether it's by journaling or therapy or exercise or music or having a cry in the car or in the toilet cubicle, whatever works. You need to make time to actually feel what needs to be felt. If you don't release that emotional pressure valve, it will leak out in other areas. Now, suggestion number 4, ask for support, but not just any support. And by that, I don't mean breaking down in front of your whole team or offloading your life story onto a client. No, you need to identify clearly who can help, how, and for how long. If you have a team, choose 1 or 2 people you trust and say something like, guys, I'm in a difficult stretch right now. Could you cover this work piece for me over the next week? So be specific, be time bound, and please be willing to return the favor when you're feeling better. Now, if you're freelance or solo, it might mean reaching out to a contractor or renegotiating a deadline or asking a client to reschedule a meeting. And you don't need to share personal details, but you do need to be clear how your capacity has changed and what specific adjustments you're requesting. And of course, don't forget about formal support. If your workplace offers access to counseling or mental health resources, lucky you, use them. Or if you already have a therapist, coach, or peer support group that you trust, this is the time to lean on them. And finally, suggestion number 5. Don't expect to bounce back at full speed, because you probably won't, and you don't need to. Regardless of whether you've taken time off or you just slowed down behind the scenes, your re-entry into work needs to be gradual. That means not filling up your calendar completely on your first week back. It also means not diving straight into the most complex or emotionally challenging work, and not pretending that you're fine when you're still running at 60%. If you lead a team, you do that by setting expectations early. You can say something like, hey, I'm easing back into things this week. I'm going to be focusing on X and Y, and I'm planning to fully re-engage with Z next week. So you're being clear, you're being honest, you're being professional. Or again, if you're self-employed, this might look like reopening your calendar in stages, pushing a few deadlines, saying no to new work coming in for another week, even if that feels really uncomfortable. But protecting your recovery pace is part of protecting your business. And if you lead others, formally or informally, how you manage this transition really matters, because whether you realize it or not, you're setting the tone. You're leading by example. If you model honest, sustainable pacing, you give everyone else quiet permission to do the same when they go through a personal crisis themselves. So, those are my 5 suggestions. Now, I'm very aware, of course, that the majority of you listening aren't going through a crisis right now. But many of you are managers, founders, or team leads, and you may well be managing someone on your team who is struggling. You might be wondering how to support them without overstepping any boundaries. My best advice to you is to start with something simple. Just acknowledge it. Don't ignore it when someone is clearly going through something difficult at work. You don't need to do a big speech, even just, "Hey, I heard you're going through a lot. I'm here if you need any flexibility or support." That's all you need to say. And maybe that person will then open up, or maybe they'll just say, "Well, thank you." But never pry. Let them decide how much to share. So instead of asking for details, ask what would help. Would it be useful to shift any deadlines? Do you want me to let others know that you're out? Is there anything I can take off your plate? So be practical, not performative, and offer something concrete. Not, "Hey, let me know if you need anything, but you know what, I'll cover the Friday meeting if that helps." If you're working solo but you're collaborating with someone, a client, a contractor, a creative partner, the same thing applies. You don't need to know the full story to show some humanity. And sometimes it's worth asking yourself quietly, who might be going through something right now and saying nothing? Because so much suffering at work is silent. People hide it because they don't know if it's safe to be human in front of you. Years ago, I tried to open up to a manager during a major personal crisis that was clearly affecting my performance. I barely got a sentence out before she cut me off and she said, "Chris, work is work. We all need to leave our personal issues at home." Wow. Well, yes, thank you for the motivational speech. I tell you, that moment stayed with me, and in a roundabout way, it became a key catalyst for becoming a coach myself, swearing I would never ever treat another person like that. Anyway, here we go. You might be going through this episode thinking, "God, I am glad I'm not going through anything like that." And you know what? I'm glad for you too. Long may it last. But crises don't always announce themselves very clearly. Sometimes it's a sudden phone call that turns your life upside down. Sometimes it's months of slow private unraveling. But at some point, they hit us all. And when they do, showing up to work, let alone leading, can feel impossible. So here's what I want you to take away from this episode. You can still show up. Imperfectly, quietly, deliberately, even when you're not okay. You can protect your energy. You can keep your authority intact and lead with steadiness, not by pretending you're fine, but by making some thoughtful adjustments and by clearly asking for what you need. And for those of you who are going through something big right now, I see you. And as sharp as the pain or the worry feels right now, it will soften. Grief, shock, emotional chaos, none of it is going to last at this full intensity forever. You also don't have to fix everything today. You just have to keep yourself steady enough to get through to tomorrow. And then, whenever you're ready, maybe not right away, but eventually, you can ask yourself, what did this crisis reveal? What did it strip away? What did it force me to confront? Because as brutal as they are, crises can bring a strange kind of clarity. They cut through the noise. They show you what's no longer working in your life, your leadership, your business. So don't rush back to business as usual. Don't waste the pain by ignoring what it's trying to tell you. Use it to make better choices next time. to set new standards, to work and lead in a way that's more sustainable. And if you're carrying something heavy as you listen to this, also know this: you're doing better than you think, and you're not alone. Now, take good care of yourself, take care of your people, and I'll speak to you again soon. Hey, it's Chris here. If this resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone else who needs to hear it. And if you want more insights on leadership, confidence, and growth, you can hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you soon.